Hello and welcome to Agri History. Today we'll talk about buckwheat. In this episode, you'll cover buckwheat, which consists of two species, the common buckwheat species and the Tartary buckwheat species. Their scientific names respectively are Fagopyrium esculentum and Fagopyrium tataricum respectively. These crops are pseudograins that are often used as whole grains for consumption or pounded into a gluten-free flour. Tartar buckwheat is largely self-pollinating, while common buckwheat is largely cross-pollinated. And both species were used as crops in ancient China and are still used today. In this episode, we will discuss the origins and domestication of buckwheat and how it came to North America. Based on archaeological evidence associated with pollen of different species of buckwheat, combined with fossilized cereal pollen, seeds, and charcoal, suggests that buckwheat cultivation began in northern China around 5500 BP. This is outside of the inferred locations where both species of buckwheat were said to be domesticated, which would be eastern Tibet, Yunnan, and Sichuan. This is in contrast with the genetic evidence, which suggests that it came from those aforementioned areas. There are several possible scenarios which would explain the origin of buckwheat in light of the contradictory evidence stream. These would be speculative given the limited nature of our current knowledge on buckwheat domestication. The first possibility suggests that the ancestor species of our common buckwheat was initially domesticated in southwestern China, but was not substantially cultivated, leaving behind little geographic evidence. It was later spread to the north of China, where it would hit its boom and be cultivated en masse. This is supported by the fact that common buckwheat is an obligate outcrosser and would crossbreed with its wild ancestors. This would reduce the evidence even further, and would explain why we have divergent accounts based on our genetic and archaeological data. The second hypothesis is that buckwheat was cultivated locally in certain regions in southwestern China, and these seeds were traded with the northern states of China, where buckwheat cultivation took off. This is supported by the fact that there is some circumstantial and archaeological data to support this, but it is unknown if this is a current possibility. When it comes to the origins of Tartary buckwheat, both it and its wild ancestors are located in the low-lying mountains of southeastern Tibet and parts of the Himalayas. There have been remnants of both common and Tartary buckwheat found in western central Nepal that are dated to 3000 BP. Common buckwheat seems to have been domesticated in the Himalayas by being brought from lower levels of the mountain to higher levels, rather than being domesticated in the higher mountains directly. Afterwards, common buckwheat spread westward throughout the Himalayas and Tibet. This likely occurred sometime between 4950 and 3951 BP. Whether or not Tartary buckwheat followed a similar path is unknown. The arrival of Tartary buckwheat in Europe was considered to date back only to the late medieval period. However, based on pollen records of buckwheat remnants in Europe, raised the possibility that buckwheat could have spread in Europe as early as the 7th millennium BP. To explore this possibility, Clark et al. Collected and analyzed a set of pre-European records of fossilized pollen and plant remnants that could be found in the buckwheat genus. These would be dated prior to 650 BP. The earliest time period with layers containing buckwheat pollen is before 11,700 BP. This suggests that a non-agricultural explanation is required for the presence of some of these pre-medieval discoveries. The buckwheat pollen could be an extinct relative of buckwheat or extinct species of buckwheat. These pre-medieval fossils require further scrutiny in order to obtain a proper model for what's going on. What is known, however, is that when the first European settlers came to America, they brought buckwheat with them, and that's how we got buckwheat in North America. This concludes our episode on buckwheat. Stay tuned for our next episode on chickpeas. See you then.